Welcome to the You Should Know Her Bible study with the theme Beauty for Ashes. By now you should have finished your worksheets or at least discussed them with your study group. And I am so excited to get started talking about Miriam this week. You know, if you have ever hesitated when you felt like God was asking you to do something because you thought, well, I don't really know if women should do that, or I don't really know if I'm qualified or if I'm talented enough, then you, like me, probably really loved the story of Miriam. What really excites me is God told us all these amazing things about Miriam, how she was resourceful and she was intelligent and she was determined to do what she was assigned to do. She was confident and she pretty much just went out and did what God gifted her to do. I also love the fact that God showed us that Miriam didn't always get it right, but that even when she faced difficult consequences, God gave her beauty for her ashes. So Miriam was a leader, and Miriam wasn't a leader because her brother Moses was the deliverer or her brother Aaron was a priest. She was a leader because that's what God created her to be. He gave her the gifts and the talents that he needed her to have because he had called her to be a leader. And that might be a little bit surprising if you don't really think of women as leaders of an entire people group. It's pretty normal for us to see women as leaders of women's ministry or leaders in the nursery situation, but in Miriam's case, and in the case of a lot of you watching today, God has called you to be a leader to a larger group than that. And that's really not surprising when you look at the Bible. In Genesis 1:28, God told men and women, or Adam and Eve, that they were both to have dominion over the earth. Not just Adam, but both of them. And that's really great. Now, sometimes we grab a few ideas about how a fallen world has shaped women, and we think that women aren't qualified. We think that women are always supposed to be underneath the authority of men. And actually what God has said is we as women are to submit to our husbands and to the spiritual authorities in our lives. But nowhere does he say, and hey, while you're at it, submit to every man ever. Be under the leadership of every man ever, or be under the leadership even of every Christian man ever. God has designed us just as special as he designed the males. We're not above them and we're not beneath them. In fact, Paul says that there is neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither male nor female. We're one in Christ. We're equal in Christ. We're viewed the same in Christ. And I love that. In fact, the times in the New Testament where it seems like Paul is saying, hey, women, sit down, shut up. If you will look at those scriptures, in fact, I challenge you to look at those scriptures, I think you're going to discover that every time Paul says something that can be construed as telling all women to sit down and shut up and never be the leader that God created them to be, you'll see that Paul is actually talking to a very specific people group. He's talking to a people group who had been worshiping a female goddess under the leadership of female priests who used fear and intimidation and condescension to keep males out of power. So just take a look at those scriptures sometime in a new way, in that light, and I think you'll then agree with Paul when he says that there's neither male nor female in Christ. But let's also look at the Old Testament. Let's look at an example from there, because we know that everything got better after the cross, right? So let's look at how God viewed women and their role in society back in the Old Testament days. Things weren't quite as great, in my opinion, as they are right now. Let's look at the story in Numbers 27. And in Numbers 27, something very interesting has happened. First of all, God has already given the law, and Moses and the people are still in the desert or in the wilderness. And a man named, I just looked up this pronunciation. A man named Zelophehad had 5 daughters, and Zelophehad passed away. And so his 5 daughters came to the front of the tabernacle and in front of Moses and in front of Eleazar the priest, and in fact in front of all the leaders and the entire assembly of the community, they said, Moses, our father has died and he left no sons. Give us our property among his relatives so that we can have our portion. Now, Moses did something really great here. He didn't look at the law and try and make it fit, because there wasn't really something that could fit. The law said that when a man died, his sons were to inherit his property. That was fair because the wives would move into their husbands, or the daughters would move into their husbands' homes and would then become part of that family and that line. So the sons were to inherit and the land was passed down that way. There really isn't a way to make that law fit when you have 0 sons and 5 daughters. And Moses didn't try. He wasn't doing backbends and somersaults trying to get that law to fit this circumstance. Instead, Moses did what most of us really need to do more often, and he went straight to the Lord and he asked God. He said, what do I do about this? And I love God's response. I'm going to read it to you. This is Numbers 27, and it is verse 6. And the Lord replied to Moses, the claim of the daughters of Zelophehad is legitimate. You must give them a grant of land along with their father's relatives. Assign them the property that would have been given to their father. So a lot of us have heard that in ancient times, women weren't even allowed to own property. That might be true, but we see that that wasn't God's plan at all. God's plan was that, yep, women were suited and eligible and allowed to own property. So God sees you as able to do whatever it is he called you to do, as long as you're leaning on him. You know, maybe you have seen yourself as not able to be in a particular leadership role because you're female, or maybe you've seen yourself as not able to do something that other men and women can do because you feel like you're not talented enough, or you don't have the background, or you don't have the upbringing, or you don't have the talent or the skills or the knowledge, or the list goes on and on. But the truth is, when God asks you to do something, he doesn't ask you to do it so that you can see yourself fail. And he doesn't, honestly, ask you to do it because you're the most qualified. He asks you to do it because from the foundation of the earth, he has planned for you to have an assignment. And he is going to equip you to complete that assignment to his satisfaction. Maybe not to yours. If you are sitting in your living room and you're looking around at maybe some dust or some clutter, and you're thinking, but I don't even do this right. That's okay. Our measure of perfection, our measure of good or even great, has nothing to do with God's measure of good or great. But please know that God has created you for something special, and he has equipped you to be able to do it. So never look at the circumstances of your life or the circumstances of someone else's life and think that you are not suited or capable of doing what he has asked. I hope you enjoy this week's lesson on Miriam. I hope to see you next week. We're going to talk about my absolute favorite female in the entire Bible, Rahab. Until then, be blessed.